this situation, we focus in on the danger that vehicles pose when crossing a road, either coming from the opposite side in this particular video, or in the next video, crossing to the opposite side. So let's have a look at the scenario that we have here. We see a line of vehicles that's actually blocking the visibility of the green car from the red driver's perspective. So no doubt he would have had a look to see if there's any oncoming vehicles. Not seeing anything, decides to go across. So let's just pause it here for a moment. So there are two things to take note of. Firstly, when crossing, either in a situation like this or any other place that we're crossing a road, always keep an eye out for any oncoming vehicles. So just having a look once or twice is not good enough. We constantly have to be on the lookout. So if the driver had done that, he would have then seen the green driver come across. So that's a one point. The second point is, in his case, he could have crossed the road at a much shallower angle. Instead of such a right angle, which is more dangerous, rather cross at a shallower angle where you can build up speed in order to merge with any vehicles that might be coming down the road. And he was free to do that because there are no vehicles on this side of the road that he would have posed a danger to had he crossed at a much shallower angle. So where we can do so, when we're going to cross into a lane, try and see if you can actually do so at speed. Because the higher the speed that you do that relative to the oncoming traffic, the easier it will be to merge. So in this case, it results in a crash. Real life example, we'll see a pickup truck coming from the left side here. Same situation, a line of vehicles that's actually blocking the view of the camera traveling down this lane, and no doubt has a look, doesn't see any vehicles, and so decides to cross. So obviously at this point, the driver thought it's clear, didn't keep on the lookout, otherwise he would have seen the camera's vehicle and just continue straight. He could also, as was explained in the animation, have crossed over at a much shallower angle. You can see cars in the distance there, but that allowed more than enough space for him to cross at more of a shallow angle, pick up enough speed as he does so that he's more able to merge, better able to merge with the oncoming traffic. Now, I just want to pause here again because the camera thinks that he's clear to actually go down the lane here. So this vehicle's crossed over into the right lane, and he's assuming that he's going to stay in the right lane and continues down the left lane. But that wasn't the case. Remember, we must expect the unexpected. And so in a situation like this, it would have been better had the camera actually just hung back a little bit to see what this driver would have been up to, which lane he would choose, and there wouldn't have been any sort of hazard or danger. Fortunately for the camera, there was this space, this escape route to the left side that he could go into in order to avoid collision, but that may not always be the case. In the previous video, we had a look at the dangers that vehicles pose when crossing the road, coming from the opposite side. In this video, we have a look at the dangers that vehicles pose when crossing the road, going to the opposite side. There are a number of variations on this, which is displayed in the different animations that will follow along with their real-life examples. In this particular animation, we've got the driver of the red vehicle in the wrong lane and at the last moment deciding that he needs to turn. The driver of the green vehicle should have been on the alert that the driver of the red vehicle is traveling slower than what would be normal for this section of the road. So in other words, why is the red vehicle traveling slower? Is the driver up to something and perhaps held back a little bit to see what this driver is up to so as to then be able to plan an escape route accordingly? But nonetheless, goes ahead and we have the resultant collision. Real life example of this, we've got this particular driver wanting to turn across the road in the wrong lane, wanting to come into the side street over here, has his indicator on, but merely having your indicator on doesn't give you the right to turn. Progresses, starts to go across the road, but now notice this vehicle approaching at speed. So the driver of this vehicle could well have had a look in his rear view mirror, had seen that there was enough space in order to cross over the road. But had he checked his rear view mirror just prior to turning, he would have noticed how quickly this vehicle had then filled the gap and so been more cautious about turning. But that wasn't the case, and the resultant collision. In this particular scenario, we've got the driver of the red vehicle wanting to cross over the road, cutting across the path of the blue vehicle, side-swiping it into the path of oncoming traffic. And so for the driver of the green vehicle, wherever you see this situation where you've got multiple cars approaching you from the opposite side of the road, always be aware that this situation could arise, because it's not uncommon where a vehicle is actually deflected into your path. So in this particular situation, it could have been better for the driver of the green vehicle perhaps to be traveling down the outer lane further from the danger. But nonetheless, they continue, and so we have the resultant collision. Real life example of this. Now notice this particular driver is indicating to turn right. So at first starts turning right, but then puts on his left indicator to start going across the road. Now the driver of the van behind him could have seen that his right indicator was on, started to go around the corner, and so assumed that this car was just simply turning into the side road and continues to approach at speed. So at this point, he should have been more alert and aware that this driver is now up to something and slowed down, but didn't do so, carries on full speed ahead with the resultant collision and deflected into the path of the oncoming traffic here, crashing into the camera's vehicle. So here we have a situation with the driver of the red vehicle, wrong lane again, wanting to cross over the road, and the driver of the blue vehicle coming down at speed. Now be aware that when you're traveling at speed, if you need to plan an escape route, the angle at which you're able to take that escape route is a lot narrower at speed. If you were traveling slower, you'd be able to deviate a lot more to either the left or the right side to avoid the obstacle ahead of you. But when at speed, you're not able to do that. So it leaves little room to play with and a greater likelihood of you actually colliding into the object ahead. And so that's exactly what takes place over here. There's a bit of a side swipe and the vehicle is deflected into the oncoming traffic, or across the road into an obstacle, as is the case here. Real life example of this. So we've got this vehicle wanting to cross over the road, the vehicle behind it traveling at speed, and so because of that has a very narrow angle with which to play, and is unable to avoid colliding with the car ahead of it. So here we have a situation where the driver, again in the wrong lane, wanting to cross over the road. But now notice that the blue vehicle obstructs the visibility of the red vehicle from the green driver's perspective, and vice versa. For the driver of the red vehicle, he or she cannot see the green vehicle, thinks it's clear to cross. The driver of the blue vehicle sees what this driver is up to, slows down and allows this driver to cross in front of him. But obviously, being obscured, the driver of the green vehicle continues ahead, and so that results in a crash. Real life example of this. So we've got the driver of the blue vehicle traveling down the left lane. The driver of the orange van is wanting to turn left into the side road over here, but notice that the white van blocks the visibility of the orange vehicle from the blue driver's perspective, and vice versa again. From the orange driver's perspective, he cannot see the blue vehicle approaching down the left lane. Resultant collision. But something I want to point out is that notice after the collision, the driver of the orange vehicle, the van, doesn't stop straight away. Actually continues in motion for quite a distance down the road. So I have a separate video on the importance of stopping as soon as you can after a collision, provided you're out of the way of any traffic and also that you're in a safe place to do so. So in this particular clip, we see that it is safe for this driver to be able to stop, but still carries on for quite a distance down the shoulder of the road. So now, fortunately for him, he does come to an eventual stop, but there could have been further dangers ahead of him. Maybe there was a ditch and he had ridden into the ditch, or there could have been pedestrians on the sidewalk here, or perhaps there was a vehicle that had parked on the side, and so by not stopping straight away could have resulted in an even worse incident, a further damage to the vehicles. So make sure that you stop as soon as you can after a collision, provided that it's safe to do so and that you're out of the way of other traffic. Another real-life example of this, where we see that the camera is now heading into the left lane here. We have an orange vehicle on the other side of this vehicle wanting to turn left and cross into this little side path over here. But it gets to the point now, if I just stop it here, where that orange vehicle is obscured to the camera, and vice versa. For the driver of the orange vehicle cannot see the camera. This vehicle now slows down in order to allow the orange vehicle to pass ahead of it. So had the camera been more alert and aware, would have been maybe on the alert that this vehicle had slowed down, and so either this vehicle is up to something in that it wants to turn, or there's another vehicle ahead of it that wants to turn and perhaps slow down to avoid any incident, but goes straight ahead and there's a bit of a collision. In this situation, we've got the driver of the red vehicle entering an intersection at the last moment, realizing that he actually wants to turn left into the side road. The driver of the green vehicle could once again have been on the alert to the fact that the red vehicle had slowed down, and so the driver is obviously up to something. Had he known the area, he would have been aware of the fact that this vehicle couldn't have turned right. So if it was slowing down, there's a possibility that it's wanting to turn left and perhaps have hung back a little bit to avoid any incident or to make sure of what this driver is up to. But that's not the case here, and there's a collision. So real life example of this, we've got this driver at the intersection wanting to turn left. Again, has his indicator on, but just to repeat the point, merely having your indicator or your turning signal on doesn't give you the right to turn. So should have still been aware of the driver of this vehicle coming down the left lane. But conversely, the driver of this vehicle is also as much at fault, because he could have seen that this vehicle is wanting to turn left, has its indicator on, slowed down somewhat to at least give this driver the space to be able to turn left, but carries on still at speed, and so results in a collision. So when you get to an intersection, always be aware of vehicles that are at the intersection that could pose a danger. Here we have a wet road, and so the camera is traveling at speed. We can see this vehicle's brake lights are on, so should have immediately slowed down. Obviously with the wet weather, not slam on brakes at all, but just been more cautious of what might take place ahead. So as we'll see, this vehicle then crosses over the road. The camera tries to avoid it, and because of the sharp angle that he tries to take to avoid that vehicle, and the fact that the road is wet, the car is induced into a slide and connects with the barrier. please like, subscribe, and get notified.